Hello everyone, today is Monday, November 2nd, 2020, and this is going to be a follow-up to our previous pod, the NFL season preview show. Today we're going to be reassessing everything, going through every single team. We're going to break down this first half of the season, make some predictions going forward for the rest of the season, and just generally have a good old time talking about football. But before we jump in, I do want to say that Jack and I recorded this podcast in between week 6 and week 7 of the NFL season. So in the time between recording and you guys actually listening to this podcast, there are a few changes, a few amendments, a few footnotes that I'm going to add at the end of this podcast. So stick around for that. And also, the conversation that Jack and I had was super long. It was about 3.5 hours of nonstop talking about football, and that is just way too much to digest in one podcast sitting. So we decided to cut the podcast into 2 parts. This part is going to be focusing on the NFC, and then part 2 will be the AFC. So if you enjoy our conversation about the NFC, please stick around and listen to the following pod, which is going to go up shortly after this one. As always, you can listen to this on YouTube by going to our channel, Nothing Notable. You can also listen to this on Spotify if you're on the go. Just type in the Nothing Notable podcast and give us a listen. So now let's jump into the conversation I had with Jack Hubert about the NFL at the midway point in the 2020 NFL season. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We're not technically at the midway point in the season. We're recording this on the Saturday before week 7.
Week 7.
Sorry,
but not quite midseason, almost.
First, we're going to just start off by talking about the questions that we started the previous pod on, the NFL preview show, because I just want to go over some of the thoughts that we had then and sort of amend a few of those. One of the questions was who gets the number 1 pick, and on that list was Washington, the Jags, the Bengals, the Lions, and the Panthers. And I think we both thought the Jags were going to get the number 1 pick, and they're still definitely in contention, but I think there's... Do you think it's going to be the Jags or do you think it's going to be the Jets, Giants?
I think the Jags are certainly up there. They will probably be a top 4 pick. But, man, the Jets are just doo-doo.
They're one of the worst. I think it's bad to always just say like something that happened recently is the biggest or the best or the worst. But this really is one of the worst teams I've ever seen in my life.
It's certainly... not one of the best teams I've ever seen in my life. And I will say that Adam Gase is certainly one of the worst coaches I have seen. And I was looking at some numbers here. If you recall, before he was hired in Miami, Adam Gase, for some reason, was regarded as like this offensive genius. The fact of the matter is, that was clearly in part to his Denver days when he had Peyton Manning. Because when you look at his numbers without Peyton Manning, which goes from 2015 to today, he has never had an offense that was ranked 22nd or higher.
Ouch.
So clearly, this man can't get the job done. And when we see what Ryan Tannehill has done since leaving Adam Gase, what Kenyon Drake has done since leaving Adam Gase, a whole other plethora of players, I don't understand how he still has a job here going into week 7.
As our dad, Bill Simmons, says, he's actually the Jets' number 1 asset because he's going to guarantee them the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they're keeping him around.
Which I will say, the prospect of the Jets getting the number 1 pick and ruining Trevor Lawrence in the same way that they have ruined Sam Darnold is so tragic to me. And if I was Trevor Lawrence, which I'm not,
Thank God.
But if I was, what I would recommend is stay another year. Do not let yourself go to the Jets.
I agree. If I'm Trevor Lawrence, I really would say I'm not playing for the Giants or the Jets or the Jaguars.
Yeah.
I'm not playing for any of these 3 teams.
Nope.
And then see who comes calling. I'm sure that there's
someone will.
I'm sure that there's a really good team that will be out of a quarterback. We talked about how the Saints don't really have a great exit plan strategy for Drew Brees. And so a really good team that doesn't want to drop off the map immediately could give up a ton for a guy, like Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and we will touch on the Saints later when we get to the NFC South, but I want to make one amendment to the previous pod when I said they had negative $21 million in cap space. Boy, oh boy, was I way wrong, because it's actually negative $80 million in cap space next year. So I apologize for giving the Saints the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, I guess the cap is kind of made up. So
yeah, So yeah, that was the first question about who's getting the number one pick. We're in agreement. I think the Jets are getting the number one pick. It would be weird if they turned the season around and won 6 straight games to end the year and ended up like 6-10.
Would be classic Jets.
It would be, yeah, because also they were 7-9 last year. And on the pod last time, I said that they could. Neither of us thought that they were going to be good, but I said they could win 7, 8, or 9 games. I don't think that's happening now.
We underestimated the awfulness that is Adam Gase.
Yeah. The other question that I want to talk about was coaches who we thought were going to lose their job.
Speaking of Adam Gase,
he was on the list, as was Dan Quinn, Mike Zimmer, Matt Patricia, Bill O'Brien, and Doug Marrone.
Well, 2 of those are already gone.
Yeah.
Dan Quinn and Bill O'Brien have been fired. Bill O'Brien is a fascinating story of how you ruin a very promising organization.
They were up 3 scores on the Chiefs in the playoffs last year, and now they're one of the worst teams in the league.
Who would have thought that game against the Bills in the playoffs would be the last win Bill O'Brien would have with the Texans?
Maybe ever.
Furthermore, who would have thought that when Bill O'Brien was up 3 touchdowns against the Chiefs in the playoffs, that he would never win another game for the Texans?
Yeah. So those were just some of the coaches. They're all losing their jobs at some point here, whether it's by the end of the season or by the start of next season. They're all probably gone. Most disappointing team candidates. I'm really proud of this one. I mentioned the Ravens, Texans, Cowboys, Bucks, and Vikings. I didn't necessarily think they were all going to be disappointing. I just thought that they were teams that could be disappointing. And in a lot of ways, they all kind of are, except for the Bucks. Ravens are good. They're not bad.
Their offense, though, has not looked as sharp as we would have thought it would have.
Right. So they really aren't a most disappointing team, but they're definitely not living up to what we expected of them. Texans, yeah, that's huge disappointment, as we just talked about. The Cowboys, what a year.
We could spend the whole podcast talking about the Cowboys and how absolutely inept they are, especially on the defensive side of the football.
The Cowboys, I want to laugh at, but the tragedy of Dak's injury kind of makes it hard to laugh at them.
It was so sad.
Yeah. And I guess we'll just talk about that later, but they're definitely a disappointing team, and they should be noted as being a disappointing team. Mm-hmm. Also on this list, I had the Bucks and the Vikings.
Bucks have been fine.
Yeah, they started off, everybody put Tom Brady in the ground. Mm-hmm. Week 1, they started carving his tombstone. They picked out the funeral arrangements. It was over for Tom Brady, even though he was just he was just okay-ish. But their defense is legit.
Their defense is very good.
And that's all you need. Peyton Manning proved that in his last few years in Denver. Then we also had the Vikings. Do you want to just briefly talk about the 4th down call to go for it against the Seahawks?
I understood it in theory.
That's the problem. It's theory.
It's theory. You were trying to put the game away.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you would have been better off, kicking the field goal and then trying to make them go for 2 at least. So it's like a double. They have to score twice, basically, then.
I have no sympathy for that decision whatsoever.
Yeah, it was not a good one.
I get it. If you ice the game, obviously it's over. Duh. Clearly that makes sense. But you go ahead and kick the field goal and you force them to score twice, like you said. I think everybody knew the Seahawks were going to win that game if they didn't successfully pull off that 4th down conversion.
Yeah.
So that's why they're one of the most disappointing teams, and that's why Mike Zimmer's going to get fired.
Most likely. I don't think he will be one who gets fired until the end of the year, just because on defense they are a very young team, and he's a very good defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think he's a good guy. I think he's a solid coach. I'm sure he will find work somewhere, at the very least, as a defensive coordinator. The Vikings' future is going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. They got quarterback issues, and we'll get to all that later as well.
I do want to mention for this disappointing team segment, I went off the board and said the Browns would be the most disappointing team. And I know some people will say, oh, they're 4-2. They're not disappointing. And my response to that is, have you seen Baker Mayfield play? Because he does not look very good at all. Did you see when the 2 good teams that they've played, which is the 2 games they've lost, they have been obliterated, and Baker Mayfield has looked absolutely horrendous. Those two teams being the Steelers and the Ravens, who are in their division.
Yeah. The Browns are who we thought they were.
They are who we thought. They're going to go 7-9, 8-8.
Yeah. Don't think that just because we said that they were going to be trash, don't think that we're going to back off of that take.
Yeah, I'm not backing down there.
No, we're definitely going to back off of some takes.
For sure. We'll get to those. I have a big take that I'm going to back down on massively.
Because we're not stupid.
Yeah.
And good football is good. We like that.
Correct.
So when we say like Justin Herbert's going to be trash and he turns out to not be trash, like that's great.
Yeah.
So we're happy to say that we're wrong about certain things.
I want every player to end up being the best player to ever play the game because that's more fun for me as a fan to watch. Like, I would like the whole NFC East to be amazing because I know I'm going to have to watch them on Sunday Night Football 8 times a year. Mm-hmm. Or on Monday Night Football or whatever. So I want teams to be good. I want players to be good because it's more fun to watch. There's no hating going on here.
Exactly. Very well put. Who is like a very good team that you think might slip pretty far down? Because there's always pretenders early in the year.
I would say right now a team that jumps to my mind is the Bears.
Yes.
Who are 5-1. But if you watch them play, like, again, the defense is, I wouldn't say amazing this year, but it's like, it's solid defense. The offense does not look good right now, even after switching from Mitch Trubisky to Nick Foles. The offense is just looks stagnant. They're not like pushing the ball downfield that much. It doesn't look efficient. So that would be the team right now that I would say is like a first place team that's gonna slip down.
So I think very quickly here, the Bears are going to get exposed as well because you can't go that far with. Well, I shouldn't say that because Nick Foles won a Super Bowl.
Nick Foles is a Super Bowl champion. Please refer to him as Super Bowl MVP Nicholas Foles.
And I love Nick Foles.
Love him. Great story.
Yeah, I'm not trying to badmouth Nick Foles. We also said it was going to be about 6 games before Trubisky got benched.
It was 2.5.
Yeah, which is pretty wild actually when that happened. I was kind of surprised. Yeah. Do you think there's any team that's terrible right now that turns it around? They don't have to necessarily make the playoffs, but do the Jets win 6 straight games? Do the Giants turn it around? Do the Jags have a Minshew mania moment?
I would say I think the Falcons are better than a 1-5 team just because they have a very solid quarterback and they have weapons. The defense is bad still, so they're very fun to play against in daily fantasy football. But I would say they're one of those teams who it's not like if I see the Falcons on my schedule, I'm like licking my chops to play them. Like, okay, this is a guaranteed win we're going to get. I think they've been in a lot of close games and games that they should have won and then didn't, especially those first like 3 weeks or so. And then another team I'll throw into that group, and we'll touch on them later, our favorite team. I think the 49ers are better than a 3-3 team. And admittedly, they have had a lot of games where they have not looked great so far. But that is in large part due to the extreme rash of injuries that have hit this team. So they're a team where if they switched it around and got to 9-7 and slipped into the playoffs, they could be trouble.
Yeah, we're going to spend some time on them. And I was going to ask about like award front runners, but I think we'll just talk about individual players once we get to the teams.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump in division by division. You want to start with the AFC or the NFC this time?
Let's switch it up and start with the NFC.
Okay.
East.
NFC East. The boys, the Eagles, the Giants, and the Washington football team. Let's start with the Cowboys. The tragedy of Dak Plagueis the Wise. So Dak, coming into the season, it's very well noted and very well documented. We talked about it last time. He got franchise tagged. The conversations about a long-term extension were up in the air. Jerry Jones was being Jerry Jones about it. This injury is really unfortunate for Dak.
It was sad to watch.
It's Theismann-esque. It's like Alex Smith-esque. And there are some injuries like this one where it's like, it makes me a little queasy. That's really unfortunate because also you take into account the kind of character that Dak Prescott has and his contract situation and how much he's affected the community of the NFL, and also the weird circumstance of Jason Garrett being there. They were playing the Giants.
Yeah.
He runs over. He is there with him, and then also calling the game is Tony Romo.
It was very strange.
It was a surreal Twilight Zone moment in the NFL, and there's usually one of those every year. It's a bummer. Like I said earlier, like it's hard to laugh at the Cowboys because of Dak's injury. I wish we could be laughing at the Cowboys right now because they're a pathetic team. But Dak's injury is like so much of a bummer.
It's a real bummer, and it'll be very interesting to see the long-term ramifications of this injury play out because he was in this contract year. It'll be interesting to see if the Cowboys decide to still commit to him long-term, or if another team wants to swoop in there and try to get him. We really do not know, because I think if the Cowboys tag him again, it's going to be like $37 million or something like that, which do you want to pay a guy coming off an injury like that much money? I don't know. That's a discussion they're going to have.
Because also it doesn't really do you any good to pay him $37 million in 1 year when you could sign him for 5 years and spread that money around a little bit.
Yeah.
You're just kind of locking yourself into a weird position for going into next year. I hope, because we talked about it last time, Jerry likes to run it like a family business. I hope he extends the family discount and says, okay, we know that the injury was bad, but we know you're going to come back strong and healthy because medicine's incredible now. And like, you know, if Joe Theismann happened today, Joe Theismann could still play, you know, maybe in
Alex
the
Smith
future.
went from losing his leg to playing in the NFL.
Exactly. So I think Dak is a driven individual. He'll come back and he'll still be a productive quarterback in the NFL. Just whether or not it's with the Cowboys or not is another thing. But other than Dak, thoughts on the terrible Cowboys?
The terrible Cowboys have... The main reason the Cowboys have been so terrible is that defense is awful. There's literally no effort on that defense, first of all. And you hear that coming from, like, players on that team, too, where they're like, you can't, like, expect me to bust my ass from the opposite side of the field to try and make a tackle. Which,
Meanwhile, watch Fred Warner.
Yeah. Which, like, yes, in theory, I understand what you're saying is you can't do that literally every single play. But also, that's the part you're not supposed to say out loud.
Yeah.
Mike Nolan, their defensive coordinator, has done an awful job. And to that extent, Mike McCarthy has done an awful job. And one of the things I said in our preview pod was that the difference between Mike McCarthy and Jason Garrett was Mike McCarthy is a good head coach.
Right.
And apparently that's not true. And when you hear all the rumblings coming out of the Cowboys locker room now, the anonymous reports to the press of that the coaches do not push the players, there's no teaching going on, it makes you think, damn, they shouldn't have fired Chris Richard, their defensive coordinator from last year.
I guess, I mean, do you have any more thoughts on the Cowboys? Because I definitely want to talk about this Eagles-Giants Week 6 matchup and those two teams.
The very quick last thought I have on the Cowboys is Ezekiel Elliott has also been awful. He has fumbled, I think, 5 times already this year.
Good point.
And it's like, damn, maybe we shouldn't pay a running back $95 million.
That is, let's do that actually now before we go on to some of the other teams. This is the correct take. You should not pay a running back that much money because you can see teams like the 49ers get valuable games and quarters out of guys like Matt Breida over the last couple of years. Raheem Mostert.
49ers, we see the Rams doing it. Mm-hmm. The Ravens have done it with their... Granted, they did pay Mark Ingram money, but they have like 4 running backs on that team who are very good.
Right.
We see it happen all the time where... Look, and Zeke is one of the most talented running backs in the league, but we clearly see that there's a lot of factors that go into a running back being productive.
Yeah. Yeah, so paying a guy like that much money is kind of crazy. And we're super pro players, so we're happy that these guys are getting paid. Mm-hmm. But if I'm a GM, I'm not willing to give that money out.
Now, I will say, quick off that, I think the only time that it is like okay or good to pay a running back top money is if it's a generational versatility type guy like Christian McCaffrey, who is like a wide receiver and a running back together. Or in the case of what the Bengals did, where they paid Joe Mixon, who is also a very good running back. they were able to pay him because they have a rookie quarterback and are not going to have to pay that quarterback for the next 4 years.
Right. Yeah. I was just about to say, who would you pay of the running backs right now, top dollar?
Right now,
and for me, it's just Christian McCaffrey.
Pretty much just Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. And there's tons of other incredible running backs out there. Derrick Henry is amazing. Dalvin Cook is great. Alvin Kamara is great too. I think he's another one who you can kind of fall into that borderline if you would pay him or not camp.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's more effective places to spend your money than running back right now. And
it's a position just completely riddled by injury, which brings us to the Giants. Another tragic injury, Saquon Barkley. I think, it's a very clear trend. The NFL started to outlaw headhunting and tackles above the shoulders, which is very good because that's going to prevent long-term head trauma. But because of that, you got to go lower, so there's a lot more leg injuries. And also, especially in this year when there wasn't that much preparation. Guys weren't quite as loose as they would be normally at this point in the year. There's been a lot of leg injuries. We've seen a lot of injuries on turf, too. Yeah. Especially. Dak's injury was on the turf at Jerry World. Mm-hmm. The 49ers have gotten murdered by the MetLife turf. Yeah. As did Saquon Barkley. Saquon's injury also really tragic. He's fortunately got, he's still on his rookie contract, so he'll be able to come back and prove that he's, worth whatever dollar figure the Giants think he's worth. But right now they're sitting at 1-6. They're just terrible.
They're very bad.
Before, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, it was kind of up in the air. Who's the worst team? The Jets or the Giants? The Jets obviously took the cake and ran away with it, but the Giants are still, they're terrible.
I will say in the Giants' defense, I don't think it's for lack of trying. No. I think there are some teams that are bad and then because they're bad, don't try. I think the Giants are a bad team that still tries. They just lack the talent. I believe the statistic that I saw is that through their first 20 games or whatever it was, Daniel Jones has significantly more turnovers than Jameis Winston. He's turning the ball. He has not had a game without a turnover so far, and I think he's averaging a little over 2 turnovers per game to this point. And it's not just interceptions for him. He has this weird ability to not hold on to the football when he's being sacked. So I just don't think he's that good. And they're another team who they're going to have a top 5 pick. Probably. It's a pretty decent quarterback class at this point. We have at least 2 of them in Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, who we think are top tier quality guys. You can maybe throw Trey Lance from North Dakota State in there too, as well as there's a kid from BYU who is rising up draft boards right now who looks very interesting. His name is escaping me at the moment, but that's another one to watch. There's a little bit of a buffet of quarterbacks in this draft where you can kind of pick the flavor that you like.
We talked about this last time about giving quarterbacks more time to prove that they're worth something, and it definitely takes time to adapt to the NFL quarterback position. But I'm pretty much sold on Daniel Jones at this point, and I know that breaks with what I said last time about giving guys 3-4 years. But yeah, I just don't see it.
I think especially when you have a top level pick and there is a guy who you're like, this guy's definitely better than what we have. Right now, you got to do it. A scenario where I don't think you do have to do it is what the Washington football team did, where they benched Dwayne Haskins after, I think it was 4 games or so of not playing great, but not playing terrible either, for Kyle Allen, who I think we can all agree is not going to be the future of the Washington football team. Yeah. Whereas Dwayne Haskins, you had those that draft capital tied up in him. I would think you would maybe want to check and see if he was.
Yeah, that was a perplexing move for me. We were kind of higher on Washington, I think, than they ended up turning out, just because of the defensive studs that they have. And we expected Dwayne Haskins to play pretty well, or at least better. benching him doesn't do much for you.
No.
It's also, I feel the same way about firing coaches in the middle of the year. Like, if you don't have an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator that you're ready to promote, that you really believe is like a really strong candidate, it doesn't really do you much to fire them in the middle of the season, because then there's just turnover, and then the players are probably going to, they're going to lose motivation, and they won't really...
Unless you're firing Bill O'Brien, and then they gain motivation.
Exactly. Very true. I don't know why you don't just go ahead with Dwayne Haskins. I think... I guess this is the one division, the only division in football where you could really justify making a move like that, because if you think that Kyle Allen can win you 6 games, then you can win the division.
There you go.
And Washington's sitting at 1-5 right now. It was nice to see Alex Smith get back into the game.
It was a nice heartwarming moment for while he was running onto the field, and then I was terrified the rest of the game for him.
Horrifying. There's that insane picture of Aaron Donald just as a backpack on top of Alex Smith.
Maybe the Washington team should trade for Aaron Donald's daddy, Dan Brunskill.
There you go. When we get to the Rams, I'll talk about Aaron Donald.
Aaron Donald's terrific. I'm making jokes over here very clearly.
But
he is the best interior defensive lineman since prime J.J. Watt.
Before Daniel Brunskill became his daddy, though, he was my MVP frontrunner.
Ooh.
And now he's not.
Because Daniel Brunskill ruined that man's career.
Yeah. I want to just mention the Week 6 Eagles-Giants game, because it was an awful game. Neither team deserved a victory. And I mentioned this to you before the pod, but I'll just mention it now as well. I think that both teams should be awarded at least one loss. I think the Eagles should be awarded 1 loss, and the Giants should be awarded 2 losses. Because what a bad game. 2 horrible teams. And then afterwards, some of the Eagles players had the audacity to get on camera and say, like we're a really good team. Like, we believe in ourselves, and we know that, like, this was a good competition, a good test, and we're gonna play better going forward. Like, you just beat the Giants by 1 point. Are you serious?
Yeah, I was debating watching that game or the presidential debate, and it was like, which car crash do I want to watch more?
Exactly.
And the answer probably should have been neither.
Yeah. Or a literal car crash.
Or a literal car crash. Or I could go make the car crash myself, and it would probably have been more enjoyable than either of those.
Definitely. Less whiplash, probably.
Less whiplash. But overall, I think that game brought us to the question of, what is Carson Wentz now?
Yeah.
Because the first 3 quarters of that game, Carson Wentz did not look good, like, at all, really. And I understand that he is throwing to literally nobody out there. They do not have weapons right now, but there's just, he's so hit or miss with how he plays individually.
Carson Wentz, when he was an MVP frontrunner, it seemed so clear, and he had such good decision-making on the field, and he had the arm talent, and he was, I think he was fairly accurate. I can't remember his exact stats. He was probably like 65% or whatever, kind of normal. But this year, and in some of his lower moments, like last year, he looks like he's in the same category as like Daniel Jones and some of these other bad quarterbacks. It's kind of scary. I don't see how adding, like, let's put Carson Wentz on the Bucs, and he has a bunch of weapons. I don't know if that makes him better.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's always helpful to have more weapons because, like you said, he's throwing lawn chairs out there, but something seems wrong.
The decision making has not been there, and he's honestly right now he's playing a lot like Jameis Winston has played over the years, where he's just not like making good decisions with the ball. He's just forcing things in there. It has been ugly to watch right now, and I think they are another team who is at a crossroads this offseason. I actually think Doug Peterson will probably be gone. They'll probably give him the boot. Or at the very least, they'll be like, Doug, you cannot be the play caller anymore. Because every time they get into the red zone, it's like, let's just keep throwing fades up to these not good receivers we have, which the goal line fade is one of the lowest percentage plays you can run unless you have like a Mike Evans or Julio Jones which the Falcons have never thrown Julio Jones the ball inside the red zone, which is just marvelous for some reason. Before the season, I said the Bears would have to decide between Matt Nagy and Mitch Trubisky, and it looks like Matt Nagy has made that decision on what they're going to have to do by saving himself. And I think the Eagles are in a similar scenario where they're going to have to decide between Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson because something's not working there. And I would say I would lean towards Carson Wentz than Doug Peterson.
And it sucks because, like, I hate to watch a guy have one really bad season and be like, oh, it's completely over for this guy. But maybe he's Andy Dalton.
Maybe he's Andy Dalton.
Maybe he's not Matt Ryan. Maybe he's Andy Dalton. I don't know. So that's the NFC East. It's a garbage division. The Cowboys being 2-4, the Eagles 2-4-1, the Giants 1-6, and the Washington professional or semi-professional football team being 1-5. Yeah, I feel yucky after talking about them.
It's not great.
Let's jump to the NFC West to get less yucky.
Let's do it.
Because that's the best division in football.
This is a very good division here.
We got the Seahawks at 5-0, the Rams at 4-2, the Cardinals at 4-2, and the 49ers at 3-3.
Should we just rip the Band-Aid off and talk about the 49ers?
Yeah, let's go ahead and
let's
start
go
with
ahead.
9. Okay, so the team is the team.
The team is the team.
Whether you have injured players or not. So you gotta stand by whatever you're putting on the field on any given Sunday.
Nick Bosa's not going to be there this season.
Right. So
I would not count on D Ford to be there this season.
Yeah. With that being said, it should be noted. It's it's not an asterisk, but it's a footnote, as Bill, our dad, likes to say.
Our dad. Father of the pod. The pod father.
The pod father. It should be noted the kind of unparalleled level of injury that we've had this year.
Yeah.
Because we've lost Nick Bosa, who was the Rookie of the Year last year. We lost Solomon Thomas, who is our starting interior lineman.
Key rotational piece at the very least.
Absolutely. We lost
D Ford.
D Ford maybe for the whole season.
We
don't
see.
know.
The report was that on Friday's practice he was working on the sled. So we'll see if he can get back in the next 12 weeks.
We also lost Richard Sherman for a number of games.
Yep.
We lost K'Wan Williams for a number of games.
We've lost Ezekiel Anza for the whole season, who was to fill in for...
Right. We lost Akello Weatherspoon for a few games. We lost Emmanuel Mosley. So all of our secondary, except for Tart and Ward...
Who are out this week.
Damn it, I forgot that.
Yep. We have lost Kawan Alexander for a couple games now.
Thank God Fred Warner stayed healthy.
Yep.
Dre Greenlaw was out for a little while.
Played very well last game.
Absolutely. So that's our defense. So in terms of starting defensive players that were not injured yet this year, that haven't missed...
Knock on wood.
If
you're with me.
Yeah. The great Fred Warner, one of the best interior linebackers.
Top 3 linebacker.
And
Eric Armstead,
who's been very productive.
Javon Kinlaw. Who is tied for the most QB pressures among rookies.
Incredible. What a finesse that trade was.
Yep.
And that's it, because we're missing Ward and Tart now, so that's it. Those are the only starters that haven't missed considerable time. And then jumping over to offense real quick, just talking injuries again. We lost our starting quarterback.
Yep.
For a little while.
For 2.5-ish games.
Yeah.
Because he was not healthy in that Miami game.
Which sucks too, because his stat line got ruined by that.
Yeah.
If not for that, I think he's at 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions right now, so it would have been 7-0 and a fine completion percentage. So yeah, we lost Jimmy. We lost our starting running back, Raheem Mostert.
Yep.
We lost our backup running back, Tevin Coleman.
Yep.
This is hurting.
It's not fun right now to go through this list.
Debo, our starting wide receiver,
was out for the first 4 games.
Mm-hmm. We also lost...
Kittle was out a couple games.
Kittle for a couple of games. Richburg, our starting center.
Still not back. Ben Garland, the backup center, is now out as well, I believe. It's been a rough start to the season.
Yeah.
Injury-wise for this team.
It's tough, but we're 3-3 right now. We should have won week 1. That's a game that you want to have back.
Mm-hmm. And we were very close to winning that game.
Right. It was a close game, and we let them back in. We've had those kind of games a few times. One of them was against the Cardinals last year, which we ended up winning on a Jeff Wilson touchdown.
The Falcons game last year was like that too.
Exactly. And then also when you look at the Chiefs game, it wasn't exactly the same, but it was a game where we're up
10 points.
10 points, and we're in the fourth quarter, and then slowly but surely you start to get the feeling, oh, damn it, we're letting them back into this. Then against the Dolphins, that was an embarrassing loss, but we didn't, I don't feel bad about that one because we were not starting any of our starting corners.
No, that one I felt bad about for like while the game was going on, and then immediately after I'm like, we're just erasing this tape.
Yeah, it was just an unfortunate situation.
Yeah.
But when you're calling guys off the practice squad the day of, basically, you're not going to be okay.
No disrespect to Brian Allen because he's a world-class athlete and a much better athlete than I could ever dream of being.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's your starting corner, that's not a good recipe.
No, and he might have been pretty decent at some point if he had the time to come up and work his way in, but instead he was immediately thrust into a starting position and they just threw the ball on him like crazy. So we're at 3-3. We just beat the Rams. Again, we're recording this before Week 7's Sunday slate of games. But in that Rams game, the Niners showed really who they are. Jimmy played well. I think he went 23 for 33 with like just under 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Very efficient. George Kittle, despite missing time, is still going to have 1,000-yard receiving.
George Kittle is currently second in the league in tight end receiving yards, despite playing like 3.5 games.
Remarkable. What an athlete. And some of our guys are starting to get healthier.
Yes.
We're not getting Bosa back, which is really devastating.
It shows, I think, how valuable elite edge rushers are in this league and why it made total sense for a couple years ago the Bears to go out and get a guy like Khalil Mack. Conversely, you see the lack of pressures on the 49ers contributing to the defensive woes the same way we do in Seattle with their awful defense so far.
And I think we showed that despite all the injuries, Shanahan can scheme a situation up pretty darn well, just like the best of them. And we could still sneak into the playoffs. After the Dolphins game, I was like, it's over. Mm-hmm. But then I calmed down.
And then the next day, it's like, this next game is must win.
Right. It becomes must win going forward. We have to really kill in this upcoming stretch of tough games. But sitting at 3-3, you could still go 13-3.
Yep.
Won't happen, but you could still go 13-3. And 13-3, by the end of the season, will probably still be a 2 seed.
Yeah. I think the focus for this team, though, right now needs to be not on winning the division,
right?
But just getting into the dance, which there is that extra playoff spot this year. So really it's going to be, can we get to second or third in our own division? And that's certainly possible, I think, still right now.
The Rams and the Cardinals are both playing very well, but the Cardinals have been off and on, hot and cold, hit or miss here and there. And still young quarterback Kyler Murray still
makes mistakes sometimes.
Their
defense isn't great still.
Exactly. So I think that the Cardinals end up in last place in our division, even though last place in our division could be 9-7 or 10-6. Any last thoughts on the Niners before we go on to the other NFC West teams?
I think the interesting conversation for the Niners more comes with what happens after this season, really, mainly in regards to Jimmy Garoppolo. Do they buy into him long term? Or is there a quarterback in this draft or one of these quarterbacks who may be on the block, like a Sam Darnold or something, who they decide to take a chance on instead? I don't know what the answer to that is right now. I don't think we've seen enough from Jimmy this season to say one way or another, because he's looked good sometimes, he's looked bad sometimes. So I think that's a wait-and-see approach we're going to have to take.
For sure. Let's talk about the Cardinals briefly. I don't have that much to say. We kind of summed it up just a second ago when we said, Kyler Murray, playing great, still makes mistakes. Hot and cold team. He's been good.
The talent is very clearly there.
It's there, and it because Lamar Jackson comes out and immediately just steals the show in his first couple of starts at the back half of 2018, I guess. And then 2019 comes out and just blows it up. Same with Pat Mahomes. His first full season just blows it up. And so we kind of have an expectation that these young quarterbacks have to blow it up immediately and just kill it and right out of the gate. Otherwise, like they're not the guy. Kyler, though, I think slightly slower start, but definitely there. Definitely going to be one of the better quarterbacks of his era.
Yeah, I think the big thing for Kyler right now is going to be cutting down on the turnovers. So far this season, he has 7 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions. It's his rushing ability so far that has really carried him. He has, I want to say it's 6 rushing touchdowns so far this year. Oh, my apologies. He has 10 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. We really see the dynamicism of that rushing when they get down into the goal line or the red zone. Interesting enough, it doesn't seem like they have as many designed runs for him as, say, like the Ravens do with Lamar Jackson. But I think Kyler is right up in that category of ability as a rushing quarterback as Lamar is. I don't know if the Cardinals are like that team this season where they're going to be real like winning games in the playoffs type of threats. They can certainly make it to the playoffs still. They have some weird losses like to Detroit and to Carolina, which are clearly inferior teams to them. But I would say the future is certainly bright down in the desert.
Coming up next.
Coming up next.
All right, let's talk about the Rams. I posed the question last time, are the Rams going to be the most expensive bad team and the most talented bad team? And we both said yes. You said they're going to go 8-8. I thought they were going to go 7-9.
Splitting hairs there.
Splitting hairs, plus minus. I still think I think that the Super Bowl season was as good as they can get, and I don't think they're getting back there. I've never been huge on Jared Goff. He's playing okay. He's fine. I don't think anybody's watching Jared Goff and saying like, wow. McVay is obviously a real talented coordinator and coach. They've got so many talented pieces, Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, Brunskill's son, as we mentioned. In terms of what I see for them, I don't see them as the NFC champions this year.
Right.
I'm totally biased because I'm a Niner fan, obviously, but I only see the Niners and the Seahawks in that division as real contenders.
And really, if we're being truly honest with ourselves, it's probably only the Seahawks.
Totally.
If we're being like honest, but we're biased fans, so we're not going to be completely honest about.
Right. I think the Super Bowl's out the window this year for the Niners just because, like we talked about, the pass rush, the season-ending injuries and stuff. The Seahawks, I think they're worse than their record would indicate.
Right.
They have a bad defense.
The defense is very troublesome. The Seahawks are the same team that they have always been, where they will go as far as Russ can carry them on his back.
Right. And I think this year shows us Pete Carroll's coaching inabilities and abilities. The Seahawks should have been a dynasty of the 2010s, and they weren't. Instead, they won 1 Super Bowl. Congratulations to the Seahawks fans. But you guys should have won more.
Yep.
And this year shows us why. It's because they didn't let Russ cook. And now they're letting Russ cook, and he's the MVP frontrunner. And I don't think there's I don't see anybody else.
I think Patrick Mahomes could still get himself into that race for sure. But yeah, it really seems like it's a 1 or 2 man race. It's the Russell Wilson show right now. And Pete Carroll's a guy who clearly, I think he is a really good head coach from the stance of like getting your guys to buy in and try and play.
Motivator.
The X's and O's I don't think have ever been his strong suit, and clearly neither has clock management or decision making.
God.
But they're one of like the top 6 teams in the league, one of like the clear-cut threats to win the Super Bowl, which I don't think there's that many this year actually, teams where I'm like, this is a great team.
Yeah, the Seahawks are kind of the Packers to me. I never fully believe in the Packers, and I never fully believe in the Seahawks because they're kind of the same team. They're both just like, how far can our star quarterback carry us?
The Rams are in that similar boat. I have a hard time ever really buying into them too much. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the Rams' schedule this year, their wins are only against NFC East teams at this point.
Right.
And we mentioned how bad the NFC East has been, and the 2 more quality teams that they have played, the Bills and the 49ers, they lost to. And they were down big to the Bills at halftime.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, just on the Seahawks, I just want to mention DK Metcalf has had an unreal year.
Incredible. One of the best wide receivers in the league.
Yeah. DK Metcalf, to me, was a no-brainer pick coming out of the draft, and I still can't believe why he fell to the end of the second round.
Well, the reason why he failed is people are like, he can't run all the routes on the route tree. I can't see him running a 5-yard zig route. His time in the 3-cone drill was low. And it's like, yes, but the dude is 6'4", runs like a 4.3 40, is great at the point of attack on the ball. He can run the high-quality routes that you need him to run, which are the go routes and the post routes and the corners. Like, the dude is basically Calvin Johnson, and I do not understand. Like, it will be one of the, similar to how we're like, how did Pat Mahomes fall to 10th in the draft or whatever? I think he was 10th.
Yeah.
Similarly to that, we will be saying, how did DK Metcalf fall to the end of the second round? How did every team have 2 chances to take him and didn't?
So that's a big reason for their success also, is because they haven't really had great weapons for a lot of Russ's time.
But between DK and Tyler Lockett now, they have 2 quality, like tier A wide receivers.
Any other thoughts on the division? We spent a lot of time talking about the Niners, but
yeah,
I think the big story for the Seahawks is like Russ, MVP frontrunner, DK's incredible season, their bad defense, which we talked about, and with the Rams, I still think that they haven't shown us who they really are yet.
Yeah, the Rams. I'm going to change my 8-8 pick to the Rams to 9-7,
and I'm going to say 10-6. Yeah,
that seems about right. It's a tough division. I think they're all kind of going to beat each other up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Let's go to the NFC North. We got the Bears at 5-1. We got the Packers at 4-1. We got the Lions at 2-3, and the Vikings at 1-5. Let's just start with the Vikings. We've basically talked about everything that we need to with the Vikings, but I didn't expect 1-5 at this point in the season, even though I thought that they were going to be a very disappointing team. Kirk Cousins. How are we feeling about Kirk Cousins?
Not great at this point.
Yeah.
He's not looked very good. He hasn't had like the worst stats in the world, but a lot of that is because they're falling behind in games, and then it's a lot of garbage time numbers he's putting up. We saw that in the Packers game. We saw that last week against the Falcons. They're a team who I think they're going to be looking for a new quarterback after the season, which the odds of that happening probably increase due to the fact that they're going to be having a new coach more than likely. What does the future hold for Kirk Cousins? I don't know, but they have weapons there between Justin Jefferson, who looks phenomenal, and Adam Thielen, who's very good. Dalvin Cook when he's healthy. They got the pieces there.
Yeah.
On offense, at least.
I think this is interesting because earlier we were talking about why you would fire a coach in the middle of the season. What are good reasons for that? I don't think they should fire Mike Zimmer because I do think he's a good guy and a good coach, and I think that they could still, put some wins together. But I do think this situation is actually a good situation to fire your coach. If you have a quarterback who isn't on a huge long-term deal and you're thinking like maybe you're in, maybe you're out, I think you want to prove as soon as possible that it's not the coordination, it's not the offense, it's the quarterback or it's the coach. I think this whole year, the Vikings just look terrible in general. So yeah. It's hard to place all the blame on Cousins, but I think one way to learn if he's your guy for the future is maybe to fire Zimmer. But I don't see that happening.
I think he has a big cap number for next year, which is unfortunate because they just extended his contract after last season.
Right. There's a couple of quarterbacks. Matt Ryan's also in that.
Matt Ryan's
camp.
on that list too.
Yeah.
Packers now. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, let's talk about the Packers. They're exactly who they were last year.
They really are. They are. What are they? 4-1 at this point.
4-1, yeah.
Where they have beaten up on the not so good teams that they played, and then they played a very good team in the Bucs last week, and they got destroyed.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers has played phenomenal this year so far.
Good for him.
It's more of the same, where again, this is a team that'll probably finish 12-4, 13-3. But yeah, I don't know if they're a threat to win it all, really.
They're not. They never will be ever again. I'll say that right now.
In the next 150 years, yeah. Not going to happen.
I think that it's good for Aaron Rodgers that he is having such a good season. I've been really poo-pooing Aaron Rodgers because he's always got his sad boy face on. But I realized something. Even when they're winning, he's a sad boy.
Yeah.
That's just who he's just a plain sort of neutral all the time. He's always got weird body language moments, but for the most part, he is who he is, when they're winning or when they're losing. So I do want to take back some of those criticisms of Aaron Rodgers a little bit, because now that he's having a really good season, he's still basically the same guy.
Yeah. Here's a question for you here. Is Aaron Rodgers just extremely talented Jay Cutler?
Whoa.
Where they kind of have like that same energy
to
them all the time?
That's a great question. Yeah, they have very similar energies. Totally.
Yeah.
If Jay Cutler was good, he'd be Aaron Rodgers.
If Jay Cutler was an elite level quarterback and an all-time great, he would be Aaron Rodgers.
And if Aaron Rodgers was bad, he would be Jay Cutler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and they would both still be rich.
Yeah. I also think that the conversation about Jordan Love making Aaron Rodgers really good again is silly.
It's so overblown.
It's the Packers did not draft a quarterback in the first round to spite Aaron Rodgers into a great season.
Yeah, and if they did, they're absolute morons.
Insane for doing that. Yeah, so I don't think that's the case at all. I just think he's having a good year. Mm-hmm. I just think things are falling positively. But they're exactly who they were last year, so there's not much to talk about with them.
This is kind of the most boring division in football right now.
Yeah.
You have the Bears, who we'll talk about next, that are 5-1, but are maybe one of the worst 5-1 teams I have seen.
Yeah, with the Bears, let's just start with, did you like the decision to bench Trubisky when they did, or would you have held out?
I thought it was a weird time to do it.
It was strange.
Yeah, you were in the middle of a game where, like, he wasn't even playing, like, that poorly. Mm-hmm. He wasn't playing great, but I just thought, like, I don't know. It was a weird one for me.
The willingness to bench him at that point makes me wonder why they didn't just name Nick Foles as the starter to begin with.
Yeah, that was all super weird.
Because if you're just going to go to Nick Foles that fast, even when you're winning games and Trubisky's not playing terribly, I don't know why you didn't just start Nick Foles in the first place. I think they set up Trubisky to fail a little bit. And I kind of feel bad for him, but also he's not very good at playing quarterback.
No.
So
he'll be a very, I think, quality backup in the league for a long time.
Yeah, certainly. I think that they definitely come back to earth. They're definitely a pretender team like we talked about. Where do you think they finish? 11 wins? I still think they could get 6 more wins out of the season.
Yeah, I would say they probably do end up actually being a playoff team, just because they already have 5 wins.
Right.
They really, if they win 4 more games, they'll probably end up being a playoff team. So I think probably somewhere between 8 if they really collapse and come back down to earth, and then probably 10. Seems like a semi-accurate level there.
The Lions, the only 2 things I want to mention are things that we already talked about in the previous one. I think that the Stafford thing is it's time to move off of Stafford. No disrespect to the man, but just like we said last time, you're not getting better with him as your quarterback, so there's no reason to keep him on your team. I don't know what the cap hit would be for that. It is probably terrible. That's probably why they have not moved off of him. But we've got a bunch of contenders for the great quarterback swap.
We really do now, especially too. It was interesting at the beginning of the season where I felt like we kind of didn't. Mm-hmm. But I feel like a lot of guys have come down to earth or just have not met our expectations.
Right. Everyone had their guy coming into the season, but that didn't mean that they were going to be the guy.
No.
They had the guy that they thought could.
There's going to be, I think, maybe around 6 or 7 teams or so that are looking for quarterbacks after this season.
I mean,
in this division alone, we have 3 teams who might be.
The Bears, definitely. The Vikings, probably. The Lions
should
be.
They could be. They very well could be.
Then also the Cowboys, possibly. The Eagles, possibly. The Giants, probably, definitely. Washington, definitely.
If we go to the NFC West, we have maybe the 49ers, depending on how the rest of this season shakes out.
Yeah, in a couple of years, probably the Rams will probably want to move off of Goff.
NFC South, the Saints are going to need a new quarterback in the next 2 years.
The Falcons.
The Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
AFC, the Patriots might need one because I don't think they'll keep Cam around.
Mm-hmm.
The Jets will have a top pick. They probably will move on. AFC South, the Jags will very possibly be looking for a new one. The Colts will more than likely be looking for one. And the AFC North, the Big Ben is old. We'll see what the Browns decide to do with Baker. Yeah, there's a lot of teams who have like okay quarterbacks.
Right. And that's the worst place you can be.
Yeah.
So that was the NFC North.
One last thing about the Lions I want to throw in there super quick. I do not understand why Adrian Peterson's touching the ball 18 times a game.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, let's talk about that.
That makes no sense to me. And it's something I mentioned before the season when they signed Adrian Peterson. But it's gotten worse because I really thought they would just use him as like a 4 or 5 carry a game guy, just maybe in short yardage. But they're like, no, let's make him our bell cow back and then like not play Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift until last week when DeAndre Swift went off. Matt Patricia is a garbage head coach. He has won 11 games in the last 2.5 years there, 6 of them coming in the first season, and they fired Jim Caldwell after he won 9 games in his final season.
Very well put.
Yes.
NFC South, our last division in the NFC. The Falcons, I'll just say they can't trade Matt Ryan because it's a really big cap hit. Same with Julio. If they wanted to just ship everybody out and start over, they kind of can't. They're really tied up. They have, and I know this because I used them as a Madden franchise the other night.
Nice.
They have a really bad cap situation with Ryan and Julio particularly.
Todd Gurley has been solid for them.
He's been good, but also how much are you willing to pay him?
Yeah.
He's probably if he's a 1,000-yard rusher this season, he's probably gonna immediately ask for a ton of money again.
Yeah, I wonder if he's a piece they could maybe move in the next week or so at the trade deadline and just get something for him, a 5th or a 6th round draft pick, because he's not probably part of their long-term plan there.
That's a good move, I think. There's a lot of teams that with injuries to the running back
could at least use a second running back.
Yeah. Maybe the Broncos need another first running back.
Oh my goodness!
To put over Phillip Lindsay.
If Melvin Gordon gets suspended for his DUI, then maybe.
So the Falcons it's going to be tough for them to be sellers, and they're definitely not buyers because they're 1-5, and
they're in this tough no man's land right now, where they're gonna have to get some smart people in their front office to do some number crunching.
Yeah, they need to really work the numbers and try to figure out ways that they can get guys out of there.
Because Matt Ryan is not going to be the quarterback of the next great Falcons team.
Right.
We've seen this year that this defense is so far away that like the offense has been okay. Matt Ryan hasn't been great this year, but like overall they've been fine. You can win games with the level of offense that they have. The defense has been atrocious and is probably too far away for them to be a like real title contender with Matt Ryan still at the helm.
It should be noted, we kind of alluded to it earlier, that at the start of the year, the first 3 games, it was like, oh no, Atlanta's just cursed because they could have won at least 2 of those games.
Correct.
And
they could have won the Cowboys game if they just would have picked up the football.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. The way we're talking about the Falcons could be totally different if they just weren't cursed in those few games.
They're a team who could rip off 6 wins in a row.
And they did last year.
Yeah.
It wasn't 6 in a row, but they put together a second half that was a lot better than their first half. And on the preview pod, I said the Falcons were going to be better than they were last year. I thought they were probably going to be 7 or 8 wins, maybe 9 wins. They're probably going 6-10 again.
Yeah.
And, that's unfortunate. I like the Falcons. I like Atlanta. I like Atlanta as a place. Bouncing off of the Falcons, Panthers, I have very few thoughts. I mentioned that they were probably a team that could skip the rebuild process, and I think that's still true. I think that they have a pretty good team. They're not going to be competitive in the playoffs, but I think they're going to avoid having a top 10 pick this year. So good on them. Teddy Two Gloves has been okay.
He's been solid, yeah. Teddy has put them in a position to win games at this point. We can add Robbie Anderson to the list of players that have done better once they have left Adam Gase. Because Robbie Anderson has done very well this year. They had an excellent draft, in my opinion, and I thought that back after the draft when they got Derek Brown and Jeremy Chin and Yuter Gross-Matos, who has a remarkable win rate on pass rushes so far. They've primarily just used him as a pass rusher, but he has been phenomenal when he's been on the field. And all of this has been happening without Christian McCaffrey on the field. They are a very interesting team at this point. Again, not a team that I think is any threat to really win a championship this year, but they're kind of like the Cardinals light for me, where they have like pieces, and the future is definitely bright there, I think.
Yeah. All in all, I think that they're in the right position, and I'm glad that I was right about it on the preview pod.
Yeah.
They're 3-3 right now. So it could go 3-13, but I think they've got some good stuff ahead of them. Want to do Saints or Bucks first?
Let's go with the Saints. We'll go in reverse order of the standings for this division.
The Saints are hugely disappointing.
They really are.
I'm really sad about Drew Brees.
He has looked horrid this season.
He's my favorite quarterback. He's been really bad, and he signed a 2-year deal.
Correct.
So that's not good.
Yeah, and even if he retires, I believe they're still on the hook for that cap space.
Yeah, so that's pretty bad.
Yeah. And there's a lot of drama going on with Michael Thomas in there.
Right. I mean, with Michael Thomas, it's not like a diva issue. It's just a competitive thing. He's just super intense and very competitive. And I get that, but
it's almost Michael Jordan-esque, where he takes everything personally.
Exactly, and there's certain value to that if you're Michael Jordan, but for most guys, just be like Julio.
Yeah,
just be yourself and and just put it on the field.
Now,
don't put it in your teammates' faces.
Now, here's one thing that I have heard coming out of the Saints locker room. Apparently, there are some players who refer to him as "can't stand Mike," as opposed to "can't guard Mike." And I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but if I'm going to act like it is, because I think it's very funny.
The Saints were my pick for one of the teams in the NFC Championship this year. That is a mistake. That's not going to happen. They're still going to make the playoffs. Drew Brees isn't bad enough that they would miss the playoffs. And their defense and their offense just aren't bad enough that they would miss the playoffs. Sean Payton's a really great head coach.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay, but what's really scary is you think, when Drew Brees signs his contract, you think, okay, we've got 2 more years of one of the best quarterbacks of all time. You're in a situation where, like, at the beginning of the year, you're thinking, okay, he's going to be here this year and he's going to be here next year. So that means we could draft somebody this year, start grooming them, then they could be the guy, or we could sign somebody the following year, then they could be the guy going forward. But now you have to move that plan up by a full year, because I think it's within Drew's best interest to retire at the end of the year. I think he knows that he's not playing well. When your body's not working.
Yep.
So that means that they're going to need a quarterback starting next year.
And they're screwed because, as previously mentioned on this pod, they have negative $80 million in cap space next year.
Right, so who are you going to get? I mean, I don't think Cam Newton signs a team-friendly deal again.
No.
I don't think Jameis Winston signs a team-friendly deal again. You're going to get stuck with, like, Mitch Trubisky or something.
Yep. And look, to a degree, the cap is kind of made up because you can move numbers around and manipulate things. But regardless, when the season starts, you have to be under that, like, salary that you're paying, that number for that year. So in a way, like, future cap space doesn't really matter because you can always crunch the numbers, move things around, bing, 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 bing. But, like, there's going to have to come a time where they cannot be $80 million over the cap.
Real tough break for the Saints.
Yeah.
This was their last shot. That was our whole thing about this division. It was a division of last shots. They're gonna have to rebuild a little bit. Maybe they could skip the rebuild and they fall into a guy like Kirk Cousins. Yeah. They trade a second rounder for, or
which
something.
They very well could skip the rebuild because just they have talent on that roster, and it's similar to a team like. When we get to the Colts, their quarterback is kind of their biggest Achilles heel right now.
Lastly, in the NFC South, the Bucs. They're good. Their defense,
very good. Their defense is top tier.
Their defense is legit, and it's a defense that could carry a team to a Super Bowl. Tom is actually better than people want to give him credit for this season.
Tom has been a B quarterback this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
He looked great against the Packers. They're just a good team. I don't really actually have that much to say about the Bucs other than like how good their defense is, because their offense hasn't done that much remarkable anything.
Really quickly about this team, I think one thing that we should talk about for a minute or two is the signing of Antonio Brown. Kevin Clark of The Ringer wrote a great article the other day. It was titled you can't defend Antonio Brown's on the Bucs in more ways than one. Referring to both on the field, that's going to cause a problem for teams, and the fact that Antonio Brown has done some awful things in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And the whole thesis, I guess, of the article was that the NFL keeps giving like second chances to, like, for lack of a better word, shitty people.
Yeah. I totally agree with that sentiment. Antonio Brown is no friend of mine. Giving him another shot in the NFL is not the help that he needs.
Yeah.
He needs somebody like a doctor to come and help him.
There's obviously people who are close to him, but he needs one of those people to like stand up to him and be like, we got to get you some help here.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think it's important to separate the manic behavior that he had last year with also the sexual assault allegations.
Yeah, there's also just
him.
shitty things that he's done.
Yes,
yeah.
There are things like that, which I'm like, whatever the condition of your mental health is not causing you to assault people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely no connection between those two things. That should be very explicitly stated.
Yeah. So
and
from a football perspective, I'm interested to see how that all plays out. But I wish he was not given this opportunity.
Yeah, I wish he was out of the league. And I felt that way for a while now. He's not a good guy. He's done some very bad things. He does not deserve a chance at redemption on an NFL field.
It's the same way I feel about a guy like Tyreek Hill. I'm like, Tyreek Hill is on the football field, like, incredible player, but I cannot root for a guy who has done the things he's done. And I think players like that are different than someone like a Josh Gordon or an Aldon Smith, who I'm rooting for them to like turn their life around and come back because they have, made mistakes and have these addiction issues, but have never like through those actions like physically harmed someone.
Right. That's the real difference. Yeah. If you're causing physical harm to someone, I don't care how good you can catch a football or how fast you can run, like Tyreek Hill. He could be in the Olympics. Ooh, cool. He still beat and choked a pregnant woman.
Yes.
So I've got no love in my heart for Tyreek Hill. I have no love in my heart for Antonio Brown. And it sucks that the NFL keeps rewarding these guys. They get very small suspensions. Antonio Brown, I mean, he was suspended for 8 games this year.
8 games. He'll be eligible to play week 9.
Great. And the NFL's never taken a strong stance on this stuff, even when there's videos of Ray Rice.
Yep.
Come on. I mean, the initial response was like, okay, 2 games. And then they were like, oops, sorry, that was a mistake.
Yep. Indefinitely.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, Colin Kaepernick is still...
Right. So where the NFL lies on these issues. And that's why they're one of my least favorite like leagues. Like, I love football so much, but as a league, like the group that's running it is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
And that's why the NBA has thrived so much also, is because like they're more player focused and they're more about values and principles.
And this is a whole separate pod topic that we can go into another time, but the NFL is poorly run in a different way than the MLB is poorly run.
Totally. Yeah. So that was a good thing to mention, because Antonio Brown, he is signing with the Bucs, and that's just an extra weapon for Tom. But as it is right now, they're a good team. I think what's been proven is that the Bruce Arians offense it's always going to have high turnover rates. So Tom throws 2 picks in week 1, and everyone's like, it's over. And then he throws a couple more picks the next couple of weeks, and everyone's like, oh my God, sky's falling. I think that's always going to be the case with Bruce Arians offenses. You saw that with Carson Palmer. You saw that with definitely Jameis Winston. You're even seeing it with one of the most efficient quarterbacks ever, Tom Brady. He's going to probably throw more picks than we had expected. But they're going to do well. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be the number 1 seed in that division, in the NFC South, that is. I do think that they probably finish still like 11-5. I don't think they're the number 1 seed in the NFC, but they've got good things going for them.
Yeah.
All right, so that was the NFC.
Boy. Did we go on a roller coaster there?
Oh, yeah. That was quite a roller coaster. I'm glad we did it first. Just to mention some of the top teams. It's 7 teams, right, that make the playoffs this year?
Yes, 7 teams are making the playoffs.
Let's just go through who we think they are. We have to have one from the NFC East, unfortunately. It's the Eagles or the Cowboys.
I'll probably go Eagles.
I think so, too. I think the Eagles still have... Well, they have the better quarterback right now, even though Carson Wentz has not played well. I would still take Carson Wentz over Andy Dalton because I think Carson Wentz maybe is just better Andy Dalton.
I think the upside is higher there.
Yeah, and I believe in the coaching a little bit more. So, yeah, I agree. I think Eagles from the NFC East. No one else is making it out of that division. The NFC West, Seahawks are definitely making the playoffs. I think the Rams are definitely making the playoffs.
I think so.
Now it's Cardinals and Niners.
Damn it.
What's funny is because the single listener will know whether the Niners are going to make the playoffs or not when they listen to this, because week 7, if we lose,
more than likely it's over.
We're not going to make the playoffs. But
you know what? I'm going to have to say the Niners because I have to have faith in my team.
Because it's either the Niners or the Bears or the Saints.
Yeah.
Because in the NFC North, it's going to be the Packers who win the division.
No, it's going to be one of those, 2 of those 3 teams.
Right.
We get 7.
So, yeah, because the Bears are going to win the the Packers are going to win the NFC North.
I think so.
And the Eagles won the NFC East. The Seahawks won the NFC West.
Yep, that's our top 3 teams there.
The Bucs win the NFC South.
Oh, yeah, our 4th. There we go. You're right.
So those are our top 4 seeds. Then we have
the Rams in there.
And then we have...
That's 5 then.
Yeah, so now we've got the Niners, the Saints, and the Bears?
I think I'm going to go Niners and Saints for those last 2 spots.
I think so too.
But because I don't think the Bears are that good, but the Bears have that nice cushion to start, so...
And they get to play the Lions and the Packers.
This is true. And the Vikings. So, yeah. Those are our teams there for the NFC.
Now let's jump into the AFC. Hello again. This is Future Daniel jumping in. This is going to be the footnotes section of this podcast. As I mentioned at the top, this is going to be split into 2 parts. So the AFC portion of this conversation will be the second part. And please give that a listen if you enjoyed this podcast about the NFC. But before we jump into the AFC, we're going to discuss a few footnotes for the NFC. There were a couple of big changes, a couple of small changes. I just wanted to address a few of them so that this was a holistic look at the first half of the NFL season. First, starting off with the 49ers, we alluded to the fact that listeners would probably know if the Niners were going to make the playoffs or not by the time they were listening. And I hate to say it, but I think that we can deduce at 4-4 in a stacked NFC West division, it is very unlikely that the Niners will make the playoffs this season. The injuries were just a bit too insurmountable. We played great against the Patriots, had me feeling really good about our chances this year, and then we just got pretty much handled by the Seahawks in this last game. So, very disappointing. Jimmy G, his ankle has not been right all season, and he re-injured it against the Seahawks. Nick Mullins came in, played pretty well, but going forward, I can't see Nick Mullins leading the charge and winning us 8 straight games. Bit of a bummer, but the Niners' chances are getting slimmer and slimmer every week because our roster is getting slimmer and slimmer every week. But enough about the Niners, let's talk about another NFC team, the Bears. After their really hot start, they have come crashing down to earth just as we predicted. They're giving the Niners quite a bit of hope in this wild card playoff race. Nick Foles has not played very well in his time, and now conversations are starting to swirl about whether or not they put Mitch Trubisky back in as the starting quarterback. I have no horse in this race. I've never been a big Trubisky guy. I've always liked Nick Foles, but to be honest, I don't think you're going to be winning a lot of games with either of those two as your quarterback. The NFC East continues to be a garbage fire. The Eagles sitting at 3-4-1 atop their division over the terrible Washington football team, the terrible Dallas Cowboys, now down to a third-string quarterback, tragically, and the 1-6 pathetic New York Giants. Nothing really has changed. We still think that the Eagles are probably going to take this division, and may God have mercy on their souls. The Rams are now sitting at 5-3. They're starting to cool off. They got taken down by the Dolphins. They're still going to make the playoffs, but we don't see championship potential in this team as it stands right now. The Cardinals, now sitting at 5-2, are actually way overperforming. I think what we talked about in this pod. We didn't expect them to be playing this well at this point in the season. They still have some young team struggles, but the Cardinals are now starting to look like the 49ers from last year. And ironically, the 49ers are starting to look like the Rams from last year. So good on the Cardinals, good on Kyler Murray. He's been playing very well. So that's just a short, quick amendment. My apologies to the Cardinals fans for not giving you guys enough credit. You seem like a legit playoff team. I still don't think you'll be making the Super Bowl, but hey, baby steps, baby steps. Lastly, in the NFC South, the Saints and the Buccaneers both 5-2 right now. So for as bad as we made the Saints sound in this podcast, they're still pulling out wins. Like I said earlier, they're definitely going to make the playoffs. They're too good to not make the playoffs. They're certainly not better than the Buccaneers right now. So, big takeaways. The Niners are in a more dire situation than we had originally thought when we recorded the podcast. The Cardinals are actually in a far better position than we expected them to be. The Bears are who we thought they were. The Buccaneers continue to be a legit team. And the NFC East is a total garbage fire. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for listening. If you stayed all the way through, please do listen to our AFC conversation. It's just as interesting and just as wild. And after that one, we'll probably see you at the end of the regular season when we'll do a season wrap-up pod. And then again for the Super Bowl. So lots of NFL content coming this year. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.